Nobody told Sloane Mercer that the most dangerous thing she would ever do was simply pay attention. She had been working the pediatric ward at St. Brendan's Hospital in Halifax for 3 years, and in that time she had learned that most emergencies announced themselves loudly. A dropped heart rate, a severed line, a monitor screaming at 3 in the morning. What she had not expected, what no one had prepared her for, was the kind of emergency that whispered. The kind that looked, on paper, like nothing at all. Emmett was 4 months old when his father first brought him in. Sloane remembered that morning, the way you remember things that change you, not in sequence, not with perfect clarity, but in feeling. The weight of the air. The particular quality of the light through the east-facing windows. The way her coffee had gone cold while she stood at the nursing station reading a chart that did not make sense. The baby had been admitted 3 days prior under the care of Dr. Henning, the head of pediatric medicine and the kind of physician whose reputation preceded him into every room he entered. Raymond Henning had trained at McGill, published in The Lancet, and spoken at conferences in cities Sloane had only ever seen on maps. When he said a patient was stable, nurses did not ask follow-up questions. When he signed off on a care plan, the plan did not get second-guessed. Emmett's chart said he was stable. Emmett was not stable. She had noticed it first on Tuesday, a slight irregularity in his feeding intake documentation. The volumes recorded didn't quite match the bags she was hanging. Small discrepancy, the kind of thing that happened when a ward was busy, when nurses were running between 4 rooms at once, when documentation lagged behind action. She had flagged it internally, told herself to watch. By Thursday, she could not tell herself anything else. Emmett Thatch was losing weight. Not the natural postpartum dip that newborns cycled through in their first weeks. He was 4 months old, well past that window. He was receiving his full prescribed volume of nutritional formula through his NG tube every scheduled feed. His labs showed no infection, no malabsorption, no metabolic anomaly that 3 different specialists had been able to identify. Dr. Henning had ordered a 4th consult. A pediatric gastroenterologist was flying in from Toronto on Friday, and yet, somewhere between the formula going in and the calories that should have been accumulating in that small body, something was vanishing. Sloane stood at the nursing station at 6:47 in the morning, 40 minutes before the end of her night shift, and stared at the numbers in Emmett's chart until they stopped making sense entirely. Then she looked up. Through the glass panel of room 7, she could see the man sitting in the chair beside the crib. He had been there every night she had worked this week, and most of the days too, according to the day shift nurses who spoke about him in careful, lowered voices. Callum Thatch. She knew his name from the admission paperwork, though she had only spoken to him twice. Brief, functional exchanges about feed schedules and the next physician rounds. Both times he had listened to her with the kind of focused stillness that unsettled her without her being able to say exactly why. He was not a large man in the way that telegraphed danger, not the way she had been told dangerous men looked. He was simply precise. His clothes were quiet and expensive. His hands folded in his lap as he watched his son sleep were completely still. The 2 men who stood outside room 7 in rotation, never the same 2 at the same time, always within eyeline of the door, told her more than any introduction could have. She had heard things, in the way that hospital staff heard things. Halifax was a smaller city than it appeared on its surface. There were layers to it, old money and older grudges, and beneath those a network of arrangements that the police force had been trying to map for the better part of a decade. The name Thatch moved through those conversations at a particular frequency. None of that was her concern. Emmett was her concern. She printed the weight chart, 5 days of measurements, and laid it flat on the desk beside her. Then she pulled up the formula administration log and printed that too. She set the 2 pages side by side and looked at them for a long time. The formula was going in. The weight how bodies worked. She thought about it on the drive home. She thought about it in the shower. She was still thinking about it when she lay down at 8:15 and failed completely to sleep. By noon, she was back in her car. She did not have a clear plan. What she had was a feeling she had learned, over 3 years of pediatric nursing, to take seriously. The feeling that something was wrong in a way that she could not yet name but could not ignore. She drove back to the hospital, changed back into scrubs, and told the charge nurse she had forgotten her phone. This was a lie. Her phone was in her jacket pocket. She went to the supply room adjacent to the pediatric ward and stood there in the fluorescent quiet, looking at the shelving unit that held the ready mixed formula inventory. St. Brendan's had switched 8 months ago to a pre-mixed nutritional formula supplied by a new vendor. The bags came sealed, barcoded, labeled with lot numbers. The system was efficient and the error rate had dropped significantly since the switch. Nurses pulled bags from the shelf, scanned them, documented the lot number, administered the feed. Sloane pulled one of Emmett's formula bags from the dedicated storage tray. The ward kept a small inventory of his specific formula, a specialized composition his physicians had ordered, and held it up to the light. It looked right. It felt right. The seal was intact. The barcode was clean. She turned it over. The lot number on the bag did not match the lot number in the documentation. Not by a digit, not by a transposition error, by an entirely different sequence. She stood very still. Then she pulled another bag. Different lot number again, and again it did not match any record in the system. She pulled a third. The seal on this one, she noticed when she looked closely. Really looked. The way you look at something when you are already afraid of what you might find had a quality to it that was almost right. Almost seamless, almost indistinguishable from the manufacturer's seal, unless you had handled these bags hundreds of times and knew in your hands what the real thing felt like. She set all 3 bags on the shelf and stepped back. Someone had replaced the formula. With what? She did not yet know. But the bags were wrong, and Emmett Thatch had been receiving feeds from this shelf for 5 days, and Emmett Thatch was losing weight in a way that defied every other explanation. She took photographs on her phone. She documented the lot numbers. She took one of the bags, the one with the compromised seal, and wrapped it in a clean plastic specimens bag she took from the drawer, labeled it with the date, the time, and the patient identifier, and put it in her locker. Then she walked to Dr. Henning's office and knocked on the door. He was at his desk, reading glasses pushed down his nose, a journal open in front of him. He looked up at her the way senior physicians sometimes looked at nurses who came to their offices uninvited. Not unkindly, exactly, but with a particular patience that contained beneath it a faint suggestion of condescension. She told him what she had found. She set the photographs on his desk and walked him through the lot number discrepancies. She told him about the seal. He looked at the photographs for a long moment. "Sloane," he said. He used her first name in the way that meant he was about to explain something to her. "Formula lot numbers get updated regularly. Supply chain rotations, batch changes. It's not unusual for the documentation to lag. By an entirely different sequence. These things happen. I'll have pharmacy take a look. And the seal. Bags get handled. Seals can show where." She looked at him. He looked at her. Something passed between them in that silence that she could not have put into words, but that she felt in the back of her throat. "I want to flag it formally," she said. "A written incident report." A pause, brief, almost undetectable. "Of course," he said. "Leave it with administration." She thanked him and left. She did not leave it with administration. She went back to the nursing station and sat with the weight chart, and the formula log and the photographs and the feeling in her throat, and she thought about what Raymond Henning had looked like in that 2-second pause. She thought about how he had not asked her where the bag was, how he had not asked her to bring it to him, how a physician, who had just been told that a critically ill infant's formula might be compromised, had responded not with urgency, but with management. She pulled up the visitor access log for the supply room. St. Brendan's had installed keycard readers on all supply and medication rooms 18 months ago, following a pharmacy audit. Every entry was time-stamped and linked to the badge of the person who entered. In the past 5 days, the supply room adjacent to the pediatric ward had been accessed 17 times. 15 of those accesses belonged to nursing staff on scheduled shifts, One belonged to a pharmacy technician running a routine inventory check. The 17th belonged to Dr. Raymond Henning. At 2:43 in the morning, 4 days ago. She stared at the timestamp for a long time. Then she picked up her phone and called a friend from nursing school who now worked in forensic toxicology at the QEII Health Sciences Center in Dartmouth. She explained what she had and asked if there was a way to run an expedited analysis on a formula sample, unofficial, between friends, outside the hospital's own lab chain. "Sloane," her friend said, "do you know what you're describing?" "I think so," she said. "That's why I'm not going through the hospital." "Bring it tonight," her friend said. She was crossing the parking garage at the end of her extended shift. It was nearly 11. She had stayed far past her hours, telling herself she was monitoring, which was true, and also that she did not want to leave Emmett, which was truer, when she heard footsteps behind her that stopped precisely when she stopped. She turned around. Dr. Henning stood 10 feet away. He was not wearing his white coat. He had his hands in the pockets of a grey wool jacket, and his expression was the same expression he had worn in his office. Patient, composed, almost kind. "Sloane," he said. "Walk with me for a minute." She did not move toward him. "I'm heading to my take-long." He took a step forward. "I know what you found in the supply room. I know you're concerned, and I want you to understand that you're looking at something that is much more complicated than it appears." She said nothing. "There are arrangements in place," he said, "that go beyond this ward. Beyond this hospital. Some situations require careful management, and not everyone is in a position to understand why decisions are made the way they are." He paused. "I'm asking you professionally and as someone who respects your work to let this go." "What's in the bags?" she said. The patience in his face shifted slightly. "That's not your concern." "Emmett is 4 months old," she said. "He has been losing weight for 5 days. So yes, actually, what's in the bags is exactly my concern." He looked at her for a long moment. The garage was very quiet. She was aware, suddenly and completely, of how alone they were in it. "Think carefully," he said, "about what you're deciding to do." She looked back at him. Her heart was hammering in a way she hoped did not show on her face. "I already decided," she said, and she walked to her car. The toxicology results came back 31 hours later. Her friend from school called her while she was sitting in her car outside her apartment building in the North End, unwilling to go inside because inside felt too still and she needed to be ready to move. The formula bags had been diluted, not emptied, not replaced with a fully inert substance. Diluted. The nutritional content had been reduced to approximately 30% of the prescribed concentration. Enough to look right, to feel right, to register correctly on a surface-level check. Enough to pass every visual inspection, not enough to sustain an infant. An infant who was already premature, already fragile, already fighting. She sat in her car for a long time after the call ended. The streetlights on her block came on. The world moved at its normal pace, and she sat completely still inside it. Then she called the Halifax Regional Police. The detective who answered was named Garrity. She told him what she had found, what she had documented, what the toxicology had returned. She told him about the access log and the timestamp. She told him about Dr. Henning in the parking garage. He listened to all of it without interrupting, and when she finished, he asked her to come in the following morning with everything she had. She did. What she did not anticipate, what she had not thought through in the sequence of decisions that had brought her here, was that Callum Thatch had his own sources of information, and that one of them sat on the hospital's administrative board, and that word of an outside toxicology inquiry into a patient in room 7 would travel faster through certain channels than it would through official ones. She was in the hallway outside Emmett's room the following afternoon, updating his chart with the new formula bags, sealed, verified, from a different supply chain that Garrity's team had approved, when she became aware that the 2 men who usually stood outside room 7 were no longer outside room 7. They were standing instead at either end of the hallway, and Callum Thatch was standing in the doorway. He was looking at her. She had spent enough time in that room over the past week, administering feeds and monitoring vitals, and documenting everything with the particular thoroughness she had applied to this case from the moment something had stopped making sense, that she had developed a working familiarity with his presence. He was not a man who wasted movement or expression. Everything he did was deliberate. When he looked at something, he had already decided to look at it. He was looking at her very deliberately now. "Mrs. Mercer," he said. She closed the chart. "Mr. Thatch." He stepped back from the door and held it open. Not an invitation exactly. The kind of gesture that was more than an invitation. She walked in. Emmett was sleeping in the crib, his vitals steady on the monitor, his color better today than it had been all week. Small chest rising and falling. She had checked on him 3 times since the new formula bags had gone in. Thatch did not look at his son. He looked at her. "I want to understand," he said. "What you found," she told him. All of it in the same clear, sequential order she had given Garrity. The weight chart, the lot numbers, the seal, the access log, the toxicology results. She did not simplify it or soften it. He was a man, she had concluded, who did not want things softened. When she finished, the room was very quiet. "You took the bag to an outside lab," he said. "The hospital lab chain was compromised. I didn't know how far up it went. Why not go to administration?" "Henning told me to go to administration." He was silent for a moment. "And the police?" "Yes." Another silence. "You walked through my parking garage at 11 at night, knowing that Henning had already spoken to you, knowing what you were carrying. I had to get to my car." Something moved through his expression, not quite what she would have called warmth, but adjacent to it. Something that looked like recognition. "You could have stopped," he said. "After his office, after the garage. At any point you could have decided this was not your problem." "Emmett is my patient," she said. He looked at her for a long moment, then he looked at his son. The quality of his stillness changed. It was still precise, still controlled, but there was something underneath it now that she recognized from the families she saw in the NICU and the pediatric ward. Parents at 3 in the morning watching a small body breathe, running the arithmetic of fear and love in some private internal calculus that they would never fully be able to explain to anyone who had not also sat in that chair. "My wife died 7 months ago," he said. It was not said for sympathy. It was said the way you say a fact that is necessary for context. "There are people who believe that makes Emmett a liability." She did not say anything. "Vincent Okafor," he said. "He's been managing my Western operations. He believed the timeline to move was now." The name meant nothing to her. She understood, from the way he said it, and from everything she had already worked out about what was in those formula bags, that it meant a great deal to him. "Henning," she said. "Henning has a debt," Okafor called it in. She absorbed this. "The police have my statement. They have the toxicology report and the access log. I know. Henning is already under investigation. I know that too." She looked at him. "What happens to Okafor?" He held her gaze for a moment. "Nothing that will be in the police report." She had known, she thought, on some level that this was the shape of it. She was not naive about the world she had walked into when she walked into room 7. She was a nurse. She had chosen to save the child. What happened in the larger architecture of Callum Thatch's life, the settlements, the reckonings, the things that happened in rooms she would never enter, was not a thing she could control. "Is Emmett safe now?" she said. "Yes." "You're certain, yes?" He said it the way he said everything, with a precision that did not leave room for ambiguity. "I have people reviewing every access point in this building. I have people reviewing the entire supply chain going back 6 months. And Okafor knows I know," she nodded. She looked at Emmett in the crib. His weight had stabilized this morning. Not recovered yet. That would take weeks, but stabilized, holding the line. "He needs to gain at least 20 grams a day for the next 2 weeks, she said. "I'd like to stay on this case." Thatch looked at her. "I'll speak to the department head." "That's not necessary. I'll speak to the department head." The thing that was adjacent to warmth moved through his expression again. This time she thought she recognized it more clearly. It was respect. Clean and simple, the kind that did not perform itself. "Mrs. Mercer," he said. "Sloane," she said. "If I'm going to be responsible for your son's feeding schedule, you can use my first moment." "Callum," he said. She picked up Emmett's chart and made a note. New formula lot number, vitals stable, weight holding. The ordinary work of the ward continuing in its ordinary rhythms, the same as it always did on the other side of extraordinary things. Raymond Henning was suspended pending investigation on Thursday morning. By Friday, the Halifax Regional Police had executed a search warrant on his home, and the results were enough to refer the matter to the Crown. Sloane heard this from Garrity, who called her that evening to tell her she had done the right thing, as if she had needed him to confirm it. She had not needed him to confirm it. Vincent Okafor ceased to be a figure of consequence in the Halifax shipping landscape approximately 10 days later. She did not ask how. She did not read about it in any news report she could find. He was simply, as far as the visible world was concerned, gone. Emmett gained 22 grams on the Friday, 25 on the Saturday. By the following Wednesday, he was up a full 140 grams from the lowest point. The color in his cheeks had changed. The NICU nurses, who had started stopping in to check on him when they had a free moment, began allowing themselves small, cautious smiles. Sloane was charting at the nursing station at the end of a Tuesday evening shift, 3 weeks after she had stood in the supply room and held a formula bag up to the fluorescent light, when she became aware that someone had set a coffee on the desk. Beside her, not the paper cup from the vending machine on the second floor, a proper coffee from the place 2 blocks down the street that didn't open until 7 and closed at 4, which meant someone had gone out of their way. She looked up. Callum Thatch was standing on the other side of the nursing station. He was not in the hallway outside room 7. He had come around. He had a second coffee in his own hand, and he looked for the first time since she had met him like a man who was not managing an emergency. "He's up another 18 grams, she said. "I saw the chart." "You read the chart?" I asked someone to explain what I was reading. She looked at him. He looked back at her with that quality of attention that had unsettled her 3 weeks ago, and that she had since come to understand was simply who he was, a man who, when he looked at something, had decided to look at it. "Thank you," he said. It was said the same way the fact about his wife had been said, not for effect, just precisely, and because it was true. She picked up the coffee. It was the right order. She had not told him, but she suspected one of the day nurses had, and it was still hot. "Emmett has a follow-up in 6 weeks, she said. "I'd like to be the one to run it." He nodded. "And if anything changes before then," she said, "anything at all, you call me directly. Not the department line, not the on-call. I have your number," he said. She had not given it to him. She looked at the coffee in her hand. She looked at the man on the other side of the nursing station, who was watching her with an expression she was only beginning to learn how to read. "You should go in," she said. "He's going to wake up for his 10 o'clock feed." Callum. Thatch nodded once. He set his own coffee down on the counter. And then he did something she had not seen him do in 3 weeks of nightly vigils and hushed hallway conversations, and one confrontation in a parking garage that she still thought about more than she should. He smiled. It was small, and it was brief, and it changed his face entirely. He went back through the door to room 7, and she watched him sit down in the chair beside his son's crib, and she thought about a lot of things, about the weight chart that had started all of this, and about baby gaining 18 grams while his father watched over him through the night, and about the particular way attention, paid carefully enough, could be the thing that saved a life. She finished her coffee. She finished her notes. She clocked out at 11:14, walked to her car alone without looking over her shoulder, and drove home through the Halifax dark, thinking that some things, once you had chosen to see them, simply could not be unseen. And that sometimes that was exactly the point.